Now, I'm going to let you listen to the Anunnaki King List, which is eerily similar to the 18th dynasty of the ancient Egyptians. So, we know Menes or Namer, he united Upper and Lower Egypt, to fight off the invaders. There was people who came in and caused a whole bunch of problems and he fought them off. Now, if you study Ahmose the First, who is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, he has a similar story. He fights off the Hyksos, these invaders, and then he unifies Egypt. And then you have Ramses II, who has invaders that come in, and then he fights them off, and he unifies Egypt. So you look at the poses of these people, the Namer palette, then you have Ahmose the First, then you have Ramses II, same poses. Only that Ramses II has, he has a whole bunch of people that he's holding. But it's similar stories and same poses. Now, I'm going to stop every now and then when I put on the king list to explain certain things, but you can judge for yourself. If you understand the 18th dynasty, then you'll see that there are similarities with the Anunnaki King List. And this goes to what I was saying before in my other video, where I believe that ancient Egypt is not a 3,000-year-old civilization. They are manipulating the history. And this goes to show that they are manipulating history. The Anunnaki are not from outer space. Celestial boats are just boats. Nibiru is basically the planet, or they're referring to Egypt, or they're referring to Africa, the continent of Africa.
After eons of time, our own species sprouted, by our own essence, an internal seed to procreate. As our numbers grew, to many regions of Nibiru our ancestors spread. Some tilled the land, some four-legged creatures shepherded. Some lived on the mountains, some in the valleys their home made. Rivalries occurred, encroachments happened, clashes occurred, sticks became weapons. Clans gathered into tribes, then two great nations each other faced. The nation of the north against the nation of the south took up arms. What was held by hand to thrusting missiles was turned. Weapons of thunder and brilliance increased the terror. As a war long and fierce engulfed the planet, brother amassed against brother. There was death and destruction both north and south. For many circuits desolation reigned the land. All life was diminished. Then a truce was declared, then peacemaking was conducted. Let the nations be united, the emissaries said to one another. Let there be one throne on Nibiru, one king to reign over all. Let a leader from north or from south by lot be chosen, one king supreme to be. If he be from north, let south choose a female to be his spouse, as equal queen to reign alongside. If by lot a south male be chosen, let the north's female be his spouse. Husband and wife, let them be, as one flesh to become. Let their firstborn son be the successor. Let a unified dynasty thus be formed, unity on Nibiru forever to establish. In the midst of the ruins, peace was started. North and south by marriage were united. The royal throne into one flesh combined, an unbroken line of kingship established. The first king, after peace was made, a warrior of the north he was, a mighty commander. By lots, true and fair, was he chosen. His decrees in unity were accepted. For his abode he built a splendid city, a gate, unity meaning.
So this is Namer or Menes.
Was its name. For his reign a royal title he was granted. On it was. The celestial one was its meaning. With strong arm order.
Also, you have to realize that this is from another location, because you have to understand that people tell the same story, but they're going to obviously change the names because of the language. So the names are going to be different in one location, even though they're talking about a story that happened somewhere else. You understand?
lands he re-established, laws and regulations he decreed. Governors for each land he appointed. Restoration and reclamation was their foremost task. Of him in the royal annals, thus it was recorded. On the lands unified, peace on Nibiru he restored. He built a new city, the canals he repaired, food to the people he provided. There was an abundance in the lands. For his spouse, the south, a maiden had chosen. For both love and warring she was noted. Antu was her royal title. The leader who is An's spouse, the given name cleverly did mean. She bore An 3 sons and no daughters. The firstborn son was by her named Anki. By An a solid foundation was its meaning. Alone on the throne he was seated. A spouse to choose was twice postponed. In his reign, concubines were brought into the palace. A son to him was not born.
So this was Amenhotep the first.
The dynasty thus begun was by the death of Anki disrupted. On the foundation no offspring followed. The middle son, though not the firstborn, the legal heir was pronounced. From his youth, one of the 3 brothers, Ib, by his mother was lovingly called. The one in the middle his name did mean. By the royal annals, Anib he is named. In kingship celestial by generations, the one who is An's son, the name signified. He followed his father An on Nibiru's throne. By count, he was the 3rd to reign.
So this is Thutmose the first.
The daughter of his younger brother he chose to be his spouse. Ninib, she was called the Lady of Ib. A son to Anib by Ninib was born, the successor on the throne he was, the 4th by the count of the kings. By the royal name Anshargal, he wished himself to be known. An's prince, who is greatest of princes, was the meaning. His spouse, a half-sister, Kishagul, was equally named. Knowledge and understanding were his chief ambition. The ways of the heavens he assiduously studied. The great circuit of Nibiru he studied.
So the 4th is actually Thutmose II, and his wife is Hatshepsut. So Kishargal, she is Hatshepsut, and you're going to hear about her like now. And also, there's someone in the future in this audiobook that's going to mention her, and he has a problem with her because of what she did to his ancestor, which is Thutmose III.
Length a shar, to be he fixed. As 1 year of Nibiru was the measure, by it the royal reigns to be numbered and recorded. The shar, to the 10 portions he divided, 2 festivals were thereby he pronounced. When nearest to the sun's quarters, a festival of the warmth was celebrated. When to its far abode Nibiru was distanced, the festival of coolness was decreed. Replacing all olden festivals of tribes and nations to unify the people, the 2 were established. Laws of husband and wife, of sons and daughters, by degree he established. Customs from the first tribes he proclaimed for the whole land. From the war, females greatly outnumbered males. Decrees he made 1 male to have more than 1 female for knowing. By law, 1 wife as official spouse to be chosen, first wife to be called. By law, the firstborn son was his father's successor. By these laws, confusion soon came about. If the firstborn son, not by the firstborn wife, was born, and thereafter by the first wife a son was born, by law the legal heir becoming, who shall be the successor? The one by the count of Shar's firstborn? The one by the first wife born? The firstborn son? The legal heir? Who shall inherit? Who shall succeed? In the reign of Anshargal, Kishargal as first wife was pronounced. A half-sister of the king she was. In Anshargal's reign, concubines were again brought into the palace. By the concubines, sons and daughters to the king were born. A son by one was the first to be born. The son of a concubine was the firstborn. Thereafter Kishargal bore a son. The legal heir by law he was, the firstborn he was not. In the palace of Kishargal raised her voice in anger, shouting, "If by rules my son, by a first wife born, from succession shall be barred, let the double seed not be neglected. Though of different mothers, of one father the king and I are offspring. I am the king's half-sister, of me the king is half-brother. By that my son the double seed of our father Anid possesses. Let henceforth the law of the seed, the law of espousal overpower. Let henceforth a son by a half-sister, whenever born, above all other sons rise to succession." And Shargol, contemplating, the law of the seed embraced with favor. Confusion of spouse and concubines, of marriage and divorce, it would be avoided. In their council, the royal counselors, the law of the seed for succession adopted. By the king's order, the scribes, the decree recorded.
So apparently she was the one responsible for changing the rules. And this guy Alalu that we're going to talk about later, he said that she was responsible for barring his ancestor, which is Thutmose III, to become pharaoh. But what we know, or what we're told, is that Thutmose III became pharaoh eventually. But according to this, no. And apparently she did have a son, and he went on to become a pharaoh. But we're told that no, it wasn't. She had only a daughter. So, who's telling the truth? And I know that Egyptologists, like some of the things that they just don't know what they're talking about. And you have to get other sources, and this is an interesting source that is similar to the 18th dynasty. And they're not talking about this, they're just completely ignoring it. And I find that fascinating.
Thus, the next king by the law of the seed for succession was proclaimed. To him, the royal name Anshar was granted. Fifth on the throne he was. Now, this is the account of the reign of Anshar and the kings who followed. When the law was changed, the other princes were contending.
So, Amenhotep the second, the fifth. So, Hatshepsut continued from the reign of Thutmose II, so she was still fourth. She was considered to be fourth. And then fifth is Amenhotep II.
Words there were, rebellion there was not. As his spouse Anshar a half-sister chose, he made her first wife. By the name Kishar she was called. Thus was by this law the dynasty continued. In the reign of Anshar, the fields diminished their yields, fruits and grains lost abundance. From circuit to circuit, nearing the sun, heat grew stronger. In the faraway abode, coolness was more biting. In Agade, the throne city, the king, those of great understanding assembled. Learned savants, those of great knowledge, to inquire were commanded. The land and the soil they examined, the lakes and streams they put to the test.
So around this time, they were having problems with climate change. There was a huge problem with the environment.
It has happened before. Some gave an answer. Nibiru in the past, colder or warmer, has grown. A destiny it is, in the circuit of Nibiru embedded. Others of knowledge, the circuit observing, Nibiru's destiny to blame did not consider. In the atmosphere, a breaching occurred that was their finding. Volcanoes, the atmosphere, forbear, less belching were spitting up. Nibiru's air has thinner been made. The protective shield has been diminished. In the reign of Anshar and Kishar, pestilences made an appearance. Toil could them not overcome. Their son, Inshar, then the throne ascended. Of the dynasty, the sixth he was. Lordly master of the Shar, the name did signify. With great understanding he was born. With much learning he mastered much knowledge. To remedy the afflictions, ways he thought. Of Nibiru heavenly circuit he made much study. In its loop of the sun's family, 5 members it embraced, planets of dazzling beauty. For cures to the afflictions, their atmospheres he caused to be examined. To each he gave a name. Ancestral forefathers he honored. As heavenly couples he them considered. On and onto, the twin-like planets, he called the first two to be encountered. Beyond in Nibiru's circuit were Anshar and Kishar, in their size the largest. As a messenger, Gaga, among the others, coursed sometimes first Nibiru to meet. 5 in all were Nibiru's heavenly greeters as the sun it circled. Beyond, like a boundary, the hammered bracelet the sun encircled. As a guardian of the heavens, forbidden region with havoc it protected. Other children of the sun, 4 in number, from intrusion the bracelet shielded. The atmospheres of the 5 greeters Inshar set out to study. In its repeating circuit, the 5 in Nibiru's loop carefully were examined. What atmospheres they possessed by observation and with celestial chariots intensely were examined. The findings were astounding, the discoveries confusing. From circuit to circuit, Nibiru's atmosphere more breaching suffered. In the councils of the learned, cures were avidly debated, ways to bandage the wound were urgently considered. A new shield to embrace the planet was attempted. All that was thrust up back to the ground came down. In the councils of the learned, the belching volcanoes were studied. The atmosphere by belching volcanoes having been created, its wound by their diminished belching had come to be. Let with invention new belching be encouraged. Let volcanoes spew again. One savant's group was saying. How the feat to achieve, with what tools more belching to attain, none the king could inform. In the reign of Inshar, the breach in the skies grew bigger. Rains were withheld, winds blew harder, springs from the depths did not arise. In the lands there was an accusation, the breasts of mothers were dry. In the palace there was distress, an accusation therein took hold. And his first wife, Inshar, a half-sister, did espouse, by the law of the seed abiding. Ninshar she was called, bear of the Shars the lady. A son she did not bear. By a concubine to Inshar a son was born, the firstborn son he was. By Ninshar, first wife and half-sister, a son was not brought forth. By the law of succession, the concubine's son the throne ascended.
So, Tutmos IV had a son by a concubine, and that person was Amenhotep III. And then we find out that Amenhotep III also had a wife that he loved. It's not they're not related. He just grew up with her and he loved her and he married her. It's the same story.
The 7th to reign he was. Duru was his royal name. In the dwelling place fashioned was its meaning. In the house of concubines, not in the palace, was he indeed conceived. As his spouse, a maiden from his youth beloved, Duru chose by love, not by seed, a first wife he selected. Dauru was her royal name. She who is by my side was the meaning. In the royal court, confusion was rampant. Sons were not theirs, wives were not half-sisters. In the land, suffering was increasing. The fields forgot their abundance. Among the people, fertility was diminished. In the palace, fertility was absent. Neither son nor daughter was brought forth. Of An's seed, 7 were the rulers. Then of his seed the throne was dry. Dauru, a child at the palace gateway found. As a son she embraced him. Duru, in the end.
So you see, I think they got ahead of themselves because they said that sons that are not theirs. So she just found somebody, someone put a child near the palace and she adopted him, or they adopted him. It's not their son. They adopted that child. And isn't that sort of like the Moses story? So I'm saying that this guy is actually what we know as Akhenaten, and then he became Pharaoh, and then he was pushed out, right? Let my people go and stuff like that. It's similar story. It's very interesting. And yeah, you're going to hear more about this.
And as a son him adopted, legal heir him decreed. Lama, meaning dryness, was his given name. In the palace the princes were grumbling. In the council of counselors there were complaints. In the end, Lama, the throne ascended. Though not of An's seed, he was the eighth to reign. In the councils of the learned to heal the breach there were two suggestions. One was to use a metal. Gold was its name. On Nibiru it was greatly rare. Within the hammered bracelet it was abundant. It was the only substance that to the finest powder could be ground, lofted high to heaven, suspended it could remain. Thus, with replenishments, the breach it would heal, protection make better. Let celestial boats be built, let a celestial fleet the gold to Nibiru bring over. Let weapons of terror be created was the other suggestion. Weapons that the ground shake loose, the mountains split asunder. With missiles the volcanoes to attack, their dormancy to bestir, their belching to increase, the atmosphere to replenish, the breach to make disappear. For a decision Lama was too feeble. What choice to make he knew. One circuit Nibiru completed, 2 shars Nibiru to count continued. In the fields affliction was not diminished. By volcanic belching the atmosphere was not repaired.
Okay, I also forgot to mention that if you see the problems that they have, it's also, remember in the Bible they talk about how the plagues in Egypt, the 10 plagues and stuff like that, well that's what was happening during this time.
A 3rd shar passed, a 4th was counted, gold was not obtained. In the land strife was abundant, food and water were not abundant. In the land unity was gone, accusations were abundant. In the royal court, savants were coming and going, counselors were rushing in and rushing out. The king to their words paid no attention. Counsel from his spouse he only sought. Lahama was her name. If
Who is Nefertiti?
destiny it be, let us beseech the great creator of all. To the king she said, beseeching, net actings provide the only hope. At the royal court, the princes were astir. At the king, accusations were directed. Foolishly, unreasoning, greater calamities instead of cure he brought forth.
And he was known as the Rebel Pharaoh. And if anybody's hated Pharaoh, it's Akhenaten.
From the olden storehouses weapons were retrieved. Of rebellion there was much speaking. A prince in the royal palace was the first to take up arms. By words of promise the other princes he agitated. Alelu was his name. Let Lama be the king no more, he shouted. Let decision supplant hesitation.
Yes, so this is my point here when I did a video a while back saying that, Akhenaten left and there had to be somebody that stayed in Thebes. There had to be people who stayed in Thebes because they kicked this guy out, right? They kicked this guy out. Not everybody followed this guy. And this just proves my point. Not everybody followed this guy. Some did, and some did not. And someone had to stay and take over and become pharaoh. Well, this guy, Alalu, he's the one that took over afterwards.
Come, let us unnerve the king in his dwelling. Let him the throne abandon. The princes to his words gave heed. The gate of the palace they rushed. To the throne room, its entrance restricted, like onrushing waters they went. To the tower of the palace the king escaped. Alelu was him pursuing. In the tower there was a struggle. Lama fell down to his death. Lama is no more, Alelu shouted. The king is no more, with glee he announced.
Now, I think this is a mistranslation. I don't think that he died. It's more like, he was abdicated the throne and he left with his people. Because we know that that's what happened with Akhenaten. Now, obviously, if I'm interpreting it properly, but this seems in line with the 18th dynasty. And he left with his people. He didn't die. Well, not yet, anyway.
To the throne room Alelu rushed. On the throne he himself seated. Without right or counsel, a king he himself pronounced. In the land unity was lost. Some by the death of Lama rejoiced, others by Alelu's deed were saddened. Now this is the account of the kingship of Alelu and of the going to earth. In the land unity was lost.
And earth is actually where they go, because they travel the ocean. Like, it's not space. These people are not from outer space. I believe that they went across the Mediterranean Sea, and wherever they landed, in Italy or wherever, that is considered to be Earth.
The kingship, many were aggrieved. In the palace, princes were agitated. In the council, counselors were distraught. From father to son, succession from on the throne continued. Even Lama, the eighth, by adoption a son, was proclaimed. Who was Alelu? Was he a legal heir? Was he firstborn? By what right did he usurp? Was he not a kingslayer? Before the seven who judge Alelu was summoned, his fate to consider. Before the seven who judge, Alelu spread his pleas. Though neither legal heir nor a son firstborn, of royal seed indeed he was. Of Unshargal am I descended, before the judges he claimed. By a concubine my ancestor was to him born. Alam was his name. By the count of Shars.
So, Anshargal is Thutmose II, who had a son with a concubine, who is supposedly Thutmose III. So, Alam is Thutmose III, who was barred from the throne.
Alam was the firstborn. The throne to him belonged. By convincing the queen his rights put aside. A law of the seed from naught she created. For her son the kingship attained.
That's Hatshepsut.
Alam of kingship she deprived. To her son instead it was granted. By descent of Alam's generations am I continued. The seed of Anshargal is within me.
So Thutmose III was, he was very important in history because he was a very good general and stuff like that. But that's all he was. He was just a very good general. He wasn't, according to this, he wasn't Pharaoh.
Seven who judged to Alelu's words gave heed. To the council of counselors they passed the matter, truth or falsehood to ascertain. The royal annals from the House of Records were brought forth. With much care they were read. On and on to the first royal couple were. 3 sons and no daughters to them were born. The firstborn was Anki. He died on the throne. He had no offspring. The middle son in his stead the throne ascended, and Nib was his name. Anshargal was his firstborn, the throne he ascended. After him on the throne, kingship by the firstborn did not continue. The law of succession by the law of the seed was supplanted. A concubine's son was the firstborn. By the law of the seed of kingship he was deprived. The kingship instead of Kishargal's son was granted. Her being a half-sister of the king was the reason. Of the concubine's son, the firstborn, the annals made no record. Of him I am descended, Alelu to the counselors cried out. By the law of succession to him kingship belonged. By the law of succession to kingship am I now entitled. With hesitation the counselors of Alelu an oath of truth demanded. Alelu swore the oath of life or death as king the council him considered. They summoned the elders, they summoned the princes. Before them the decision was pronounced. From among the princes a young prince stepped forward. About the kingship words he wished to say.
I believe this is Tutankhamun, what we know as Tutankhamun.
Succession must be reconsidered to the assembly, he said. Though,
and I'm going to prove this later, but that's another point of contention because they make it seem that Tutankhamun was the son of Akhenaten. I don't know where they get this from. They just happen to say it. And there's people, you would read articles and they say they say most likely, they're not even sure if it's Tutankhamun is really Akhenaten's son, but it's not. Okay, so they're saying that Akhenaten left, built his kingdom somewhere else, and then he died. Tutankhamun comes back to Thebes, but the thing is that if he comes back to Thebes, there's a pharaoh that's already there that's gonna contend well, I'm already pharaoh, so what are you doing? Get out of here, But no, he did not leave Thebes. That's what I'm saying. He did not leave Thebes. He was always in Thebes. He did not go to Amarna. He didn't come from Amarna at all, and he's not Akhenaten's son. So I don't know where they're going with that.
neither firstborn nor by the queen a son of pure seed am I descended. The essence of On in me is preserved, by no concubine diluted. The counselors heard the words with amazement. The young prince to step closer they summoned. They asked for his name. It is Anu, after my forefather An am I named. They inquired about his generations. Of An's 3 sons he them reminded. Anki was the firstborn, without son or daughter he died. Anib was the middle son, instead of Anki the throne he ascended. Anib, the daughter of his younger brother, took to be wife. From them onward the succession in the annals recorded. Who was that younger brother? A son of An and Antu, one of purest seed. The counselors with wonderment looked at each other. Anuru was his name. Anu to them announced he was my great ancestor. His spouse Ninuru was half-sister. Her son was firstborn. Anama was his name. His wife was a half-sister. By laws of seed and succession, a son she bore him. Of pure descent the generations continued, by law and by seed perfect. Anu, after our forefather An, did my parents name me.
I guess that's why Tutankhamun. I never understood why Tutankhamun was so important, but maybe that's why, because they know that he is actually the last of the original pharaoh, like Menes, Namer. He's the last line of pure line of Namer. Maybe that's why he was considered to be so important, because I never understood why Tutankhamun was so important, but apparently Anu is important in the Sumerian pantheon, who are offshoots of the ancient Egyptians. Like, you'll see that if you study it, they have stories from the ancient Egyptians, which is what, Tutankhamun is, who is Anu.
From the throneship we were removed. From An's pure seed we were not removed. Let Anu be king, many counselors shouted. Let Alelu be removed. Others, caution, did counsel. Let strife be prevented. Let unity prevail. They called in Alelu, the discovered findings to be told. To the prince Anu, Alelu his arm in embrace offered. To Anu he thus said, though by different offsprings of one ancestor we are both descended, let us live in peace, together Nibiru to abundance return. Let me keep the throne, let you keep the succession. To the council's words he directed, let Anu crown prince be, let him be my successor. Let his son my daughter espouse, let succession be united. Anu bowed before the council, to the assembly he thus declared, Alelu's cupbearer I shall be, his successor in waiting, a son of mine, a daughter of his, as bride shall choose. That was the council's decision. In the royal annals it was inscribed.
So, just to fast forward, Anu eventually challenges him. They have a fight, one-on-one fight. Anu wins, so he becomes pharaoh. Then this guy goes off to across the sea, to find gold and everything like that. And so he did something, and then they go there. Then eventually Anu goes there, and then he challenges Anu again, and Anu beats him again. But this time, he bites off Anu's dick. So when they found Tutankhamun, they found an erect, mummified penis. And the reason why, because they don't understand why they have an erect mummified penis, because there's no other pharaoh that has that. But the reason why they had that is because this guy, Alalu, bit off his penis. He bit off Tutankhamun's penis. So when they buried him, they put an erect penis. That's why he has an erect penis, right? So these Egyptologists don't know that. They just try to theorize what happened or why they did it, because no, it's clear why they did it. If you understand other sources, you understand why they did it. So this is the 18th dynasty, and the Anunnaki are actually the ancient Egyptians. And I find it very fascinating that they're not aware of this, or maybe they are, and I know that they're manipulating history. This is the 18th dynasty, but according to the Anunnaki, this is like the beginning the beginning of their history, the beginning of their empire. So how is this the 18th dynasty in ancient Egypt? Doesn't make any sense.